Enigma depravatio est. Enigma crudelitas est.
Welcome back, my fellow seekers. This is part 2 of my inspiration of Alita Battle Angel. In my last video on Alita, I talked about how Alita could represent an angel, theologically speaking. Now I want to address another topic that the movie inspired me to think about. The one major criticism I have of Yukito Kishiro's story is that why didn't he have it all take place on Venus in the future past, with Earth and Venus's moon as the place where the terraforming wars were happening, leading to a dystopian civilization and the dying of Venus. That could make the story far more fascinating. Too many sci-fi authors focus on Mars, so I kind of look at Mars as being the Captain Marvel of the solar system, getting all the attention, with Venus being Alita with its enigmatic potential. Like many sci-fi authors, Yukito wanted to make a larger saga using all the planets in the solar system, but I would have restricted down to just Earth and Venus to fit a more scientific hypothetical scenario of the advancement into a Type 2 civilization. Sadly enough, comes to an end fitting the dystopian genre and fitting the character flaw of Alita. Just as Alita is flawed, so too is the civilization she lives in. There really is no ultimate bad guy, despite what the movie is kind of setting up with Nova. Don't get me wrong, Nova's no good guy, but then again, Alita is, let's just say, a fallen angel. So this civilization failed the Great Filter test due to their many sins. Sometimes sci-fi authors tend to Mary Sue the future, which is why we need to think about the past, for history may repeat itself, especially when you reach a certain technological threshold. So I didn't like the scene in the movie where the landscape was so lush. Clearly James Cameron had a say in this scene, trying to remind people of Avatar. Beyond the farmlands of Iron City, the landscape actually gets more desolate, according to the manga. Iron City is located in an oasis, where there's fresh water, which is used to filter out the smog, and also acts as a barrier wall around the city, protecting it from any leftover radiation and outside intruders scavenging around, for there's only so much resources to go around, most of it coming from the suspended city of Zalem. Alita's world is no Pandora, so this is why I give the movie an 8 out of 10, because originally in the manga, Earth was far more desolate and dry, like Mad Max. This is why I think Yukito should have chosen Venus as a dying planet with a Mad Max kind of landscape, reminding people what the future could be like. So Venus could symbolically fit better now that the Venus hypothesis is starting to be taken more seriously. But I understand that maybe the science wasn't clear to many authors back in the 90s, so I understand why Yukito wanted to choose Mars and focus on the future. It just narratively is easier to write up. But now that we have an understanding of the Fermi paradox, or the Great Filters, and the potential habitability of Venus, more authors should consider the possibility that the future was the past. So what does the Venus hypothesis tell us? Well, the planet Venus may have been once far more Earth-like, with shallow oceans and continents. If astrobiologists' understanding of Venus's geography is right, then having shallow oceans of only a couple hundred feet deep or less would increase the likelihood of microbial life and algae life emerging in the warm waters. That is the implication of new research claiming to see evidence of granite on the highlands of the planet in data almost 2 decades old. In the 1990s, NASA's Galileo spacecraft detected nighttime infrared emissions coming from Venus's surface. Analyzing this data, the international team led by planetary scientist George Hashimoto, now at the Okayama University in Japan, found that Venus's highland regions emitted less infrared radiation than its lowlands. One interpretation of this lower infrared emissions from the highlands is that they are composed of largely of felsic rocks, particularly of granite. Granite, which on Earth is found on continental crusts, requires water for its formation. The potential discovery was published in the Journal of Geophysical Research. This is the first direct evidence that early in the history of the solar system, Venus was a habitable planet with plenty of water, says Dirk Schultz-Mackuk, and astrobiologist at Washington State University in Pullman. The question is how long Venus remained habitable, but this gives new impetus for the search of microbial life in Venus's lower atmosphere. The United States and Russia are working together on a proposal called the Veneer D that would deploy an orbiter and a lander to Venus around the year 2025 to find out if the dark streaks on Venus's clouds could be airborne extremophiles embedded with the remaining water vapor mixed in with the sulfur dioxide clouds, which could indicate more life existed in the past. We understand that our paper doesn't resolve everything, responds co-author Seiji Sugita, a planetary scientist from the University of Tokyo. Sugita says that the next step is to apply the models to the data from the European Space Agency's Venus Express spacecraft, which is already orbiting Venus, and then the Japanese Space Agency's Venus Climate Orbiter, launched back in 2010, where it gathers more data backing up the presence of granite under the lava crust of Venus. In 2016, Annabelle Cartwright of Cardiff University and Dr. Michael Way of NASA's Goddard Institute proposes that the Venus hypothesis might have some validity after performing computer simulations of what Venus would have looked like. They found that the current models indicate that Venus may have been habitable around 750 million years ago. Complex life may have evolved on the highly irradiated Venus and transferred to Earth on asteroids through lithopanspermia. This model fits the pattern of pulses of highly developed life appearing and diversifying and going extinct with astonishing rapidity through the Cambrian and the Ordovician periods. Also, this could explain the extraordinary genetic variety which appeared over the periods, which could have been a major factor in the Cambrian explosion, sparking life on Earth. Current 3D models of the atmosphere of Earth-sized planets orbiting closer to their stars have shown that the habitable zone extends closer to the stars than previously thought. Also, isotope studies also indicate that previous existence of liquid water on Venus with some still in its upper atmosphere. If plate tectonics were active in the early habitable Venus, then it must have ceased by the time the planet developed into a stagnant lid phase, with a violent resurfacing event occurring around 700 million years ago, according to the crater counting models. Most of the Venetian crust is thought to have melted and resolidified at the time, with only remnants of granite remaining at the highlands and the rest presumed to be under the lava crust hundreds of feet down. Any carbonate rocks existing before this happened would have been mostly reprocessed in the mantle of Venus, releasing carbon dioxide, just as it happens on Earth, but at much massive scale, leading to a runaway greenhouse effect and the evaporation of water, with the associated negative implications of life. One hypothesis for the cause of this is Venus may have had a moon that slowly collapsed onto Venus, causing it to violently resurface, the event over a 100 million year period, which caused Venus to completely stop rotating and then start churning the opposite direction between 700 and 600 million years ago. Before this event, it's possible that Venus could have been just like Earth, with a habitable zone closer to the Sun, as the Sun was not as hot and less luminous by about 10%, which makes a big difference on the habitable zone. About a billion years ago, Venus would have been sitting in the front of the habitable zone just as Earth is today. With the chemical signature of granite being detected on Venus, this greatly increases the likelihood that Venus evolved complex life, and even possibly a Type 1 or Type 2 civilization. So authors like Graham Hancock may be looking at the wrong planet for a lost planetary Type 1 civilization. Prior to 700 million years ago, Venus would have only needed about 600 million years for evolution to take hold, with a 50 million year period for intelligent beings to evolve. And due to the physics of the planet, most likely they would look very similar to us. According to Dr. Dale Russell, he argues that evolution tends to evolve things to an optimal form due to consistent environmental determinisms, although producing many variations of similar traits like teeth and eyes, for which animals and humans share. He argues if the dinosaur Troodon had not gone extinct, it would have evolved to look like a humanoid creature, like a dinosauroid. Maybe this is what we mean when we say we are made in the image and likeness of God. So Venus may have evolved to a similar intelligent hominoid-like species. There will be some differences, like maybe the Venetians had larger eyes like Alita. So if Kishiro adopted Venus as the host planet, he could have kept to the hominoid design with slight variations, if it fits the logic of the current science. In Alita Battle Angel, we could categorize that civilization as a dying Type 1.5. Currently, we are around a Type 0.7 or Type 0.8. What also inspired me to think about Venus is Yukito Kishiro's design of the floating suspended sky city of Zalem, which NASA has proposed with the concept of a high-altitude Venus operational concept, or HAVOC, where large helium blimps with habitation pods could be floating to set the foundation of colonization of Venus 30 miles up in the atmosphere. Maybe it was Kishiro's suspended sky cities that partially inspired this. But instead of creating a floating city to colonize Venus in the future, maybe in the past that civilization resorted to creating a floating city to escape the anthropogenic climate change happening on the surface of Venus. As the troposphere of Venus was heating up, they resorted to creating helium-tanked magnetic levitation sky cities that partially floated on the denser layer of the atmosphere around 12 miles up, which was anchored and held up from the ground like a water tower. For they were not able to create large space stations due to technological and economic and political limitations. So they created these sky cities for a couple thousand years until they were able to complete the terraforming of the moon and Earth. But their pride caused them to destroy the moon in the process due to a world war over the terraforming and the ownership of these expanded territories. I think Kishiro is right that just because a Type 1 civilization unites the whole planet doesn't mean that you're going to stay united forever when you expand away from the mother planet, just as the Americans broke away from the British. So this is what led to the great fall of the sky cities, in turn destroying Venus. So maybe someday Alita Battle Angel's flaws may inspire people to refine sci-fi stories and inspire ideas to think about our place in the solar system. Alita is an enigma to most people, so I hope you all seek Alita out by supporting this movie. It really deserves far more attention than your average superhero movie like Captain Marvel. Then again, the kingdom of heaven is for the humble. So maybe Alita has set a major precedent for good live-action anime adaptations that may threaten the natural order of Hollywood. This has been Enigma Seeker. Keep seeking those enigmas.